The marble lobby of Blackwood Industries gleamed under morning light, cold and flawless. Victoria Sterling's heels clicked against the floor with metronomic precision as she passed the reception desk. 7 years of this. 7 years of fresh lilies in crystal vases and the same polite smile from the receptionist. At 29, she had perfected the art of invisibility disguised as indispensability. Auburn hair swept into a flawless chignon, navy suit pressed sharp enough to cut, a smile warm enough to disarm, professional enough to dismiss. 42 floors above, Harrison Blackwood stood at floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a kingdom he'd conquered with calculation and cold ambition. At 35, he'd built an empire from nothing. Hotels, restaurants, luxury resorts spanning 3 continents. He saw opportunities where others saw obstacles. What he never saw were the people who made it all possible. Victoria entered his office at exactly 7:45 a.m. She always did. Leather portfolio in one hand, Ethiopian blend coffee in the other, newspapers folded to the sections he'd read first. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood." She set the cup at the precise spot he expected. "Tokyo deal papers are ready for signature. Mayor's office confirmed lunch at 1:30. I rescheduled your 3 o'clock with the architects to accommodate the site visit." Harrison glanced up from his tablet, his eyes already moving past her to the documents. "Peterson account?" "Resolved. They were concerned about Miami delays. I assured them we're on schedule and arranged for you to call personally at 4. "Good." He signed without looking. "Anything else?" Victoria hesitated. The pause was microscopic, but she felt it stretch like a fault line. "Catherine Wells from London wants to meet with both of us about European expansion next week." "Both of us?" His eyebrows lifted. "You mean in strategy meetings? She believes my client relations insights could be valuable internationally." Harrison considered this for half a breath. "Set it up. You know my calendar better than I do." What he didn't know was how much of his empire rested on her invisible labor. She remembered that his Chicago client's daughter was graduating and sent congratulations on the company's behalf. She knew which investors preferred calls over emails, which contractors needed pressure, which board members required delicate handling. When his father died 3 years ago, Victoria had arranged everything. Funeral, condolences. Schedule cleared for 2 weeks without him lifting a finger. When he returned, fresh flowers waited on his desk beside his favorite sandwich. He never asked who had done it. The shift came on a Wednesday in October. Autumn light slanted harsh through the windows, illuminating dust motes and scuff marks Victoria had never noticed before. "Morning." She set down his coffee. The word came out naked, stripped of formality. "Papers are on your desk. Singapore numbers look strong." Harrison looked up, brow furrowing. "Morning." Victoria turned to leave, then stopped. "Harrison, do you ever wonder what I do when I'm not here?" The question landed between them like something fragile and dangerous. He studied her properly for the first time in weeks. Tired eyes. Tension in her shoulders like wire pulled too tight. "I assume you have a life outside the office." "Everyone does, do they?" Her voice was soft, almost sad. "Because sometimes I wonder if I've forgotten what mine looks like." His phone rang. The moment shattered. Victoria answered with her usual grace, and the day proceeded as if nothing had changed. But something had. Over the following weeks, the warmth in her smile dimmed by degrees. Their conversations became transactional. Cold exchanges of information without the small observations that had once connected them. "Morrison contract needs your signature." Board meeting moved to Thursday. No explanations. No insights. Just the bare mechanics of her job. Harrison noticed the way you notice a song playing in the wrong key. His day still ran smoothly. Meetings started on time. Coffee arrived at perfect temperature. Yet he felt like someone had moved all the furniture 2 inches to the left. One November evening, he worked late. The office had emptied hours ago. At nearly 10, he emerged to find Victoria still at her desk, illuminated by the pale glow of her screen. "You're still here?" She looked up. In the dim light, he saw the exhaustion carved into her features. "Morrison presentation needed those market analyses you requested. I wanted them ready for tomorrow." "You could have done them in the morning." "Could I?" She saved her document, turned to face him fully. "Between your calls, coordinating with London and preparing for the Peterson site visit?" The question hung heavy with implications he didn't want to examine. He'd never calculated her workload, never counted the hours she spent keeping his world spinning. "I appreciate your dedication." Victoria smiled, but it was tired and distant. "I know you do, Harrison, but appreciation and acknowledgement aren't the same thing." She gathered her things and left him standing alone, surrounded by the fruits of her invisible labor, beginning to understand how much of his success had always depended on efforts he'd never seen. December arrived with client dinners and year-end chaos. Victoria maintained her excellence, but the invisible threads connecting them frayed. She no longer lingered after meetings. She stopped offering insights that had shaped his decisions. Most telling of all, she began leaving at exactly 5:30, work completed with mechanical precision, but stripped of the extra touches that had once defined her. "Is everything all right?" he asked one January afternoon, watching her pack up with unusual efficiency. "Everything's fine." Her tone suggested otherwise. "Wellington contract is in your inbox. Tomorrow's breakfast meeting is confirmed. Is there anything else you need?" The formality struck him like a blow. When had she started asking if there was anything else he needed? As if she were a stranger who happened to know his schedule. "No," he said quietly. "Nothing else." As Victoria walked toward the elevator, Harrison watched her retreating figure and wondered when the woman who'd been his trusted confidant had become someone he barely recognized. He didn't know that in 3 days she would place a single envelope on his desk. He didn't know his perfectly ordered world was about to collapse. The envelope sat on Harrison's desk like an accusation. White, unmarked, perfectly centered. He'd arrived at 7:15, as always. But Victoria wasn't there at 7:45. By 8:30, his coffee had gone cold and untouched. By 9 he'd opened the envelope with hands that shook in ways he didn't understand. "Dear Mr. Blackwood, effective immediately, I am resigning from my position as your executive assistant. My final responsibilities have been documented and transitioned to HR. I wish you continued success. Victoria Sterling." No explanation, no forwarding contact. Just clinical formality from a woman who'd once known him better than he knew himself. Harrison stared at the letter until the words blurred. Then he reached for his phone. "Victoria, this is Harrison. Call me back immediately. Voicemail." He tried again, and again. By the 10th attempt, his voice had lost its commanding edge. "Please, just tell me what I did wrong." She never called back. The first day without her was chaos disguised as routine. Harrison managed his morning calls but forgot the Tokyo investor's daughter had just gotten engaged. The man hung up offended. Lunch ran an hour late because no one had confirmed with the mayor's office. By evening, he'd missed 3 critical meetings Victoria would have rescheduled, and his assistant from HR looked at him with barely concealed panic. "Mr. Blackwood, I don't know how Victoria managed all this. The systems she built are incredibly complex. Then figure them out." His voice came out harsher than intended. "That's what I pay you for." But by the end of the week, Harrison knew the truth. Victoria hadn't just managed his schedule. She'd been the invisible architecture holding his entire empire together. Clients stopped calling him directly. They asked for Victoria. Investors who'd seemed loyal suddenly turned cold. His London partner Catherine Wells was blunt on their video call. "Where's Victoria? She was the only reason I wanted to expand into European markets. She understands relationships in a way you never have, Harrison." She resigned. Catherine's expression hardened. "Then you've lost more than an assistant. You've lost the heart of your operation." The call ended. Harrison sat in his office as evening shadows stretched across the floor, surrounded by documents he didn't fully understand, and calendars that had somehow become incomprehensible without Victoria's touch. He began searching for her. Private investigators, HR records, every contact they'd shared. But Victoria Sterling had vanished as if she'd never existed. Her apartment was cleared out. Her phone number disconnected. Even her social media accounts had been deleted. It was as if she'd erased herself from his life with the same precision she'd once used to organize it. 2 weeks after her departure, Harrison found himself at a cocktail bar in the financial district. The place was elegant and cold, filled with the kind of people who measured worth in zeros and saw relationships as transactions. He was nursing his second whiskey when he saw her. Victoria sat alone at the far end of the bar, wearing a crimson dress he'd never seen before. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders instead of being swept back. She looked different. Free. almost happy, until she saw him. The warmth drained from her face. She grabbed her purse, but Harrison was already moving, cutting off her escape route. "Don't run," he said quietly. "Please." "I'm not running." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "I'm leaving." "There's a difference. Why?" The word came out raw, stripped of the control he usually maintained. "Why did you just disappear?" Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Disappear? Harrison, I've been disappearing for 7 years. You just never noticed until I stopped making your life convenient. That's not fair, isn't it?" She met his eyes, and he saw something in them he'd never seen before. Anger. Real, burning anger. "Tell me, what's my favorite color? What do I do on weekends? Do I have family, friends, dreams that don't involve managing your calendar?" Harrison opened his mouth and realized he had no answers. "That's what I thought." Victoria moved past him toward the door. "Wait." He caught her wrist gently. She froze at the contact, and he felt her pulse racing beneath his fingers. "I want to understand. Help me understand. You want to understand?" She turned back, and now her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I gave you 7 years, Harrison. 7 years of my life making sure yours ran perfectly. I remembered every client's birthday, every investor's preference, every detail that mattered to your success. And you never once asked me anything about myself that wasn't related to work. I appreciated everything you did. Appreciation isn't the same as seeing someone." Her voice cracked. "You looked at me every day and never saw me. I was just another piece of your perfect machine." The words hit him like a physical blow because they were true. Undeniably, painfully true. "I'm sorry." His voice was barely a whisper. "Victoria, I'm so sorry." She pulled her wrist from his grip, but gently. "I know you are. But sorry doesn't change 7 years of invisibility. Then let me change the future." Harrison heard the desperation in his own voice and didn't care. "Have dinner with me, not as my assistant, as yourself. Let me learn who you really are." Victoria studied him for a long moment. Something flickered in her expression, too complicated to name. "Why would I do that?" "Because I can't sleep anymore." The confession came out before he could stop it. "I lie awake at night realizing how much of my life you held together and how little I ever gave back. Because my empire is crumbling without you, and I'm beginning to understand it was never really mine to begin with." "Is that all?" Her tone was sharp. "You want me back because your business is falling apart?" "No." Harrison stepped closer, close enough to smell her perfume, something floral and unfamiliar. She'd never worn perfume in the office. "I want you back because I finally understand what I lost, and it wasn't an assistant." Victoria's expression softened slightly, but her walls remained. "One dinner. That's all. And Harrison, if you check your phone even once, I'm gone. Deal." They sat at a corner table in a small Italian restaurant Victoria chose. No business talk, no interruptions. Just conversation, hesitant and awkward at first, then gradually flowing like water finding its path. Harrison learned she loved old movies and acoustic guitar, that she'd wanted to be an architect before financial necessity pushed her into administrative work, that she had a sister in Boston she hadn't visited in 3 years because she'd been too busy managing his life. And with every revelation, he felt the weight of his blindness growing heavier. "I was engaged once," Victoria said quietly, halfway through dessert. 5 years ago." Harrison froze. "You were?" His name was Daniel. He was kind, patient, but he couldn't compete with Blackwood Industries. She smiled sadly. "You called me at midnight on what was supposed to be our engagement dinner. Emergency with the Shanghai investor. I left Daniel sitting at the restaurant and never came back." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried. The next morning I came to your office to explain what happened, to ask for boundaries. But you had that presentation for the board and you needed me focused." She met his eyes, so I stayed focused. And Daniel found someone who could actually be present in their own life. Harrison felt something crack open inside his chest. "I destroyed your relationship." "No." Victoria shook her head. "I let it be destroyed. That's the difference. I made myself invisible because being seen felt too risky, too vulnerable. Why was it risky?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to voice. Victoria looked away. "Because I was afraid of what you'd see if you really looked." Harrison reached across the table and took her hand. She didn't pull away. "I'm looking now," he said softly. "And what I see is the most remarkable woman I've ever known. Strong, brilliant, beautiful. How did I never see it before?" "Because you weren't ready to." Her fingers tightened around his. "And I'm not sure you're ready now. Try me." Victoria withdrew her hand slowly. "There's something you need to know. The reason I left wasn't just about being invisible." Harrison's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "I got an offer 3 months ago. Catherine Wells wanted me to run European operations. Full executive position. Triple my salary, but I turned it down because I couldn't imagine leaving you." Relief flooded through him. "So you chose to stay?" "I chose to stay," Victoria confirmed, "until I overheard your conversation with Marcus from the board." Harrison felt the ground shift beneath him. "What conversation?" "The one where he asked if you'd ever considered promoting me to VP of Client Relations. And you laughed." Her voice remained steady, but her eyes glittered with hurt. "You said I was perfect where I was. That promoting me would mean training someone new, and you couldn't afford the disruption." Memory slammed into Harrison like a fist. That casual conversation 2 months ago. Drinks after a board meeting. He barely remembered saying it. "Victoria, I didn't mean it the way it sounded." "Didn't you?" She stood, gathering her coat. "That's when I finally understood. I wasn't invisible because you didn't see me. I was invisible because you preferred me that way. Convenient, controllable. Always there when you needed me, and gone when you didn't." "That's not true, isn't it?" Victoria's voice broke. "Prove me wrong, Harrison." She walked out of the restaurant, leaving him alone with the check and the crushing weight of his own blindness. Harrison sat there long after she'd gone, understanding finally crystallizing into something sharp and painful. He hadn't just lost his assistant. He'd lost someone who loved him enough to make herself invisible, and he'd been too blind to see it. Harrison stood outside Victoria's new apartment building in the rain. 3 weeks since their dinner, 3 weeks of unanswered calls and ignored messages. 3 weeks watching his empire fracture while he finally understood what held it together. Not spreadsheets. Not strategy. The lobby door opened. Victoria emerged in workout clothes, earbuds in, completely unprepared for him standing there soaked and desperate. She stopped. "Harrison, what are you doing here?" "I fired Marcus." Her eyes widened. "What?" "From the board. Yesterday. Told him his assessment of your value was the single, stupidest thing I'd ever heard, and that his inability to recognize talent was exactly why our competitor growth is outpacing ours." Harrison stepped closer. "Then I created a new position. VP of Strategic Relations. Salary is $400,000 plus equity. It's yours if you want it." Victoria stared at him. "You fired a board member because of what he said about me?" "I fired him because he was wrong. And because I was wrong." Harrison's voice cracked. "You were never just an assistant, Victoria. You were the architect of everything I built. And I'm not asking you to come back to make my life convenient. I'm asking because you deserve to be seen for what you actually are, which is essential, brilliant, irreplaceable." Rain dripped from his hair, cold rivulets running down his neck. Victoria watched him with an expression he couldn't read. "Come inside," she said finally. "You're going to catch pneumonia." Her apartment was small but warm, filled with things he'd never known she loved. Bookshelves overflowing with novels, framed architectural sketches on the walls. A guitar leaning in the corner. "How long have you played?" he asked, nodding at the guitar. "Since I was 15. My father taught me before he died." Victoria handed him a towel. "You never asked." "I know." Harrison dried his face, the weight of 7 years pressing down. "I know I never asked about anything that mattered. But I'm asking now. Why now? Why does it matter now? Because I can't stop thinking about you." The confession spilled out raw and honest. "Because every morning I wake up and reach for my phone to text you about some meeting or client issue, and then I remember you're gone. Because my office feels empty even when it's full of people." Victoria turned away, arms wrapped around herself. "That's not enough, Harrison. What would be enough?" "I don't know." Her voice was small. "Maybe nothing. Maybe I gave too much for too long and there's nothing left." Harrison moved closer. Close enough to touch, but not touching. "I don't believe that." "Why not?" "Because you wouldn't be shaking right now if you felt nothing." Victoria turned to face him and he saw tears on her cheeks. "You arrogant bastard. You think you can just show up here with grand gestures and job offers, and I'll forget 7 years of being invisible? No. I think I'm a fool who took the most important person in his life for granted, and I'm begging for a chance to do better." "Begging?" She laughed bitterly. "Harrison Blackwood doesn't beg. He does now." Harrison dropped to his knees in front of her, pride abandoned. "Please, give me a chance to know you. Not as my assistant, as Victoria, the woman who loves old movies and plays guitar and wanted to be an architect, the woman who's stronger than I ever deserved." Victoria looked down at him, something breaking in her expression. "Get up. This is humiliating. For who? I'm past caring about dignity." He stayed kneeling. "I care about you, and I'm terrified I realized it too late." She reached down, pulled him to his feet. They stood inches apart, breathing hard, the air between them electric with 7 years of unspoken tension. "I can't trust you," Victoria whispered. "You had 7 years to see me and you didn't. What makes this time different?" "Because I'm awake now. Because every day without you is physical pain. Because I finally understand that you weren't just running my life. You were in it, and I want you in it again. Not working for me, with me, beside me, as what?" Harrison cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. "As whatever you'll let me have," Victoria's breath hitched. For a moment she leaned into his touch. Then she stepped back, breaking the connection. "I need time." "How much time?" "I don't know. More than 3 weeks." She walked to the door, opened it. "Go home, Harrison. Let me think." He left, but not before seeing her hand tremble on the doorknob. Over the next month, Harrison tried to prove he'd changed. He sent flowers to her apartment with notes about things they'd discussed that night. Rare architecture books, tickets to acoustic concerts, small gestures that said I'm paying attention now. Victoria never responded. But the gifts weren't returned either. Then Catherine Wells called. "Harrison, we need to talk." "It's about Victoria. What about her?" "She's accepted my offer. She starts running European operations in 2 weeks." The world tilted. "She what?" "She called me last week. Said she'd reconsidered. I'm flying her to London next Monday to finalize everything." Catherine's voice held satisfaction that felt like a knife. "I told you. You lost the heart of your operation." Harrison hung up and immediately dialed Victoria. This time she answered. "Is it true?" His voice was raw. "Are you leaving for London?" Silence stretched between them. Then quietly, "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I don't owe you explanations anymore, Harrison. You made sure of that. I thought we were working toward something. We aren't working toward anything." Her tone turned cold. "You're working toward assuaging your guilt. I'm working toward having a life that's actually mine. Victoria, please. Don't." The word was sharp as glass. "Don't make this harder than it already is." "Then let me see you. One more time. Let me say goodbye properly." Another long silence. Then, "Tomorrow, 7 p.m., the park near my apartment." The line went dead. Harrison spent the night pacing his penthouse, rehearsing speeches that felt inadequate. He'd finally seen what he had, finally understood what he'd lost, and now she was disappearing across an ocean. The next evening, he arrived at the park early. Autumn had stripped the trees bare. The air smelled of wood smoke and dying leaves. He waited on a bench, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, painting everything gold and desperate. Victoria appeared at exactly 7, wrapped in a charcoal coat. She sat beside him but didn't look at him. "I'm not going to ask you to stay," Harrison said quietly. "That would be selfish. But I need you to know something." "What?" "I love you," Victoria's breath caught. She finally turned to face him, eyes wide with shock. "What did you say?" "I love you. Not as my assistant. Not as the person who made my life work. I love you, Victoria Sterling, the woman who plays guitar and wanted to build things and gave 7 years to someone too blind to see what was right in front of him." Harrison's voice broke. "I love you, and it's killing me that I only figured it out when it's too late." Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. "You can't say that now. Why not?" "Because I spent 7 years wanting to hear those words and you never saw me long enough to say them." She stood abruptly. And now you say them when I'm finally choosing myself? I know the timing is terrible. I know I don't deserve a response, but you deserve to hear it. You deserve to know that someone finally sees how extraordinary you are. Victoria wiped her eyes roughly. I need to tell you something too. Anything. I'm not going to London. Harrison's heart lurched. You're not? I never was. Her voice turned bitter. I lied to see if you'd fight for me, to see if you cared about me or just about what I could do for you. The betrayal hit him like a fist to the gut. You lied? Yes. I called Catherine and told her I couldn't accept. Then I called her back and asked her to tell you I had. I wanted to see what you'd do when you thought you were losing me for real. That's manipulative. It is. Victoria's eyes blazed. It's also the first time in 7 years I had any power in our dynamic. How does it feel, Harrison? Being controlled? Being tested? Having someone treat you like a means to an end? Harrison stood slowly, understanding crashing over him. You wanted me to feel what you felt. I wanted you to understand what it's like to be invisible, to be valued only for what you provide, to have someone look at you and see a function instead of a person. I understand now. His voice was hollow, and I'm sorry. But Victoria, you just proved we're exactly the same. Her face went pale. What? You manipulated me to make a point. You used Catherine and a fake job offer to test me like I was a variable in an experiment. Harrison stepped closer. You talk about wanting to be seen, but the moment I finally saw you, you hid behind deception. We're both controlling, we're both scared, and we're both so damaged we don't know how to be honest without it being a weapon. Victoria slapped him. The sound cracked across the empty park. Harrison's head snapped to the side, cheek burning. When he looked back, Victoria was crying openly. You're right, she whispered. We're both broken. And maybe that's why this will never work. Or maybe that's exactly why it will. Harrison caught her wrist gently as she tried to walk away. We're broken in ways that fit together. You know how to see people. I know how to build things. You taught me to look. Let me teach you it's okay to be seen. I don't know if I can trust you. Then let's start there. No games, no tests. Just honesty. He released her wrist. Do you have feelings for me? Real ones? Victoria met his eyes, and in them he saw 7 years of longing and hurt and hope tangled together. Yes, I do. God help me, I always have. Then stay. Not in London. Not at Blackwood Industries. Just stay in the same city as me, and let's figure this out like two broken people who might possibly fix each other. She studied his face for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. Okay. But Harrison, if you make me invisible again, I'm gone. For real this time. I won't. I promise. He pulled her close and she came willingly, burying her face in his chest. They stood there as darkness fell, two damaged people holding each other in the ruins of what they'd been, and the uncertain promise of what they might become. Neither saw the photographer in the trees, camera clicking softly in the shadows. Neither knew that tomorrow, their embrace would be front-page news, and neither understood that the real battle for their future was about to begin. The photograph appeared everywhere. Business tabloids, financial news sites, social media feeds exploding with speculation. Billionaire Harrison Blackwood in secret romance with former assistant Harrison saw it first on his phone at 6 a.m., his stomach dropping as he registered Victoria's face buried in his chest, his arms around her, both of them vulnerable in ways they'd never meant to be public. He called her immediately. I've seen it. Her voice was tight. My phone's been ringing since 5. Reporters are outside my building. Stay inside. I'm sending security to get you. You can stay at my penthouse until this dies down. Harrison, this isn't going to die down. This is your reputation we're talking about. She paused. And mine. He heard the fear beneath her words. We'll handle it together, will we? Because right now, every news outlet is running stories about how I slept my way into a VP position that doesn't exist yet. The venom in the articles was immediate and brutal. Victoria Sterling, they claimed, had been secretly involved with Harrison Blackwood for years. Her resignation had been a calculated move to manipulate him. The flowers, the gifts, the new executive position were all proof of inappropriate workplace relationships and corporate nepotism. By noon, 3 board members had called for an emergency meeting. By 3 p.m., Two major investors had threatened to pull out. By evening, Harrison's lawyer delivered the news with grim efficiency. The board wants you to publicly distance yourself from Victoria. Issue a statement saying the relationship allegations are false, that she resigned for personal reasons, and that any future employment would be based solely on merit, not personal connections. Harrison sat across from his legal team in the Blackwood Industries conference room, the city lights twinkling below like indifferent stars. And if I refuse, they'll force a vote of no confidence. You could lose control of your own company. Let them try. His lawyer leaned forward. Harrison, be realistic. The optics are terrible. Former assistant, power dynamic, sudden promotion after a relationship begins. This looks like textbook sexual harassment from the position of power. Except Victoria and I weren't involved when she worked for me. Our relationship started after she left. Can you prove that? Because they're already digging up every late night you two worked together, every business trip, every closed-door meeting. They're building a narrative, and it doesn't look good for either of you. Harrison's phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. We need to talk. Now. She was waiting in his penthouse when he arrived, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her hair loose and eyes shadowed with exhaustion. I'm leaving, she said before he could speak. Not to London. Somewhere else. Somewhere the media won't follow. No. Harrison, your empire is burning because of me. Your board wants you gone. Investors are pulling out. Everything you built is at risk. I don't care. You should. Her voice cracked. This is your life's work. I won't be the reason you lose it. Harrison crossed to her, caught her shoulders gently. You're not the reason. The toxic system that makes this a scandal is the reason. I should be able to have feelings for someone without it destroying everything. But you can't. Not in this world. Victoria touched his face, the gesture achingly tender. And I won't let you sacrifice everything for me. What if I want to? Then you're not thinking clearly. She pulled away, reached into her bag, and handed him a prepared statement. I've already drafted this. It says we had a brief personal relationship that ended amicably. That I resigned because I wanted a career change, not because of anything inappropriate. That you offered me a position based on 7 years of exemplary work, which I declined to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Harrison read it, feeling cold spread through his chest. This makes you look like you ran away. I did run away, just not for the reasons they think. She smiled sadly. This way your reputation stays intact. The board backs down. Investors stay. Blackwood Industries survives. And us? There is no us, Harrison. Not publicly. Maybe not privately either. Tears welled in her eyes. I finally got you to see me, and now we have to pretend I don't exist again. The universe has a sick sense of humor. I won't release that statement. Then I'll release it myself. I've already sent copies to 3 major outlets. They'll publish in the morning with or without your cooperation. Harrison felt something break inside him. You're doing it again, making yourself invisible to protect me. No, I'm making a choice. Victoria's voice strengthened. For 7 years, I made myself small because I was afraid. This time, I'm choosing to step back because I see the bigger picture. Your employees need Blackwood Industries. Your clients depend on it. I won't let my presence destroy all of that. What about what I need? You need your company more than you need me. You just don't realize it yet. The words hung between them like a death sentence. Is this really what you want? Harrison asked quietly. Victoria moved closer, rose on her toes and kissed him. It was soft and sad, and tasted like goodbye. No, she whispered against his lips. But it's what's right. She walked to the door. Harrison watched her go, paralyzed by the understanding that this woman, who had spent 7 years sacrificing herself for him, was doing it one final time. Victoria. She stopped, hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. I love you. That's not going away because of bad press or board pressure or public opinion. I know. Her shoulders shook. I love you too. That's why I'm leaving. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like finality. Harrison stood alone in his penthouse, surrounded by luxury that suddenly felt hollow. He'd finally found something real, something that mattered more than deals and quarterly reports and empire building, and he was watching it walk away. His phone rang. Marcus, calling from an unknown number despite being fired. Don't answer it, Harrison told himself. But his hand moved on instinct. Harrison, I know we had our differences, but I'm calling as a friend. Marcus's voice was uncharacteristically serious. The board is moving against you tonight. Emergency vote scheduled for tomorrow morning. They're using the Victoria situation to remove you from CEO position. Let them. What? I said let them. Harrison walked to the windows, stared out at the city he'd conquered. If keeping my company means pretending Victoria doesn't matter, then I don't want it. You're not thinking straight. This is everything you've worked for. No. Victoria was right. I spent 7 years building an empire and forgot to build a life. Harrison's voice hardened with decision. You want to do something useful, Marcus? Help me. Help you what? Burn it all down. Over the next 6 hours, Harrison moved with the same ruthless efficiency he'd once used to build his empire. He called in every favor, activated every contingency plan, pulled every hidden lever of power. By midnight, he'd sold his controlling shares in Blackwood Industries to a conglomerate that would keep the company running, but remove him entirely from leadership. By 2 a.m., he'd liquidated assets worth hundreds of millions. By dawn, he'd restructured his entire life. His lawyer stared at him across the conference table as the last papers were signed. You just gave up everything. No, Harrison said quietly. I finally got my priorities straight. The statement hit the news at 7 a.m. Harrison Blackwood steps down as CEO, sells controlling interest in Blackwood Industries. In a shocking move, billionaire Harrison Blackwood has voluntarily relinquished control of the company he built from nothing. In his resignation statement, Blackwood cited a desire to pursue personal priorities and thanked his team for years of dedication. The financial world exploded with speculation. But Harrison wasn't watching the news. He was standing outside Victoria's apartment building as the sun rose, holding a single guitar pick he'd bought from a vintage shop. She emerged at 8, probably heading to another interview or another escape plan. She froze when she saw him. What did you do? Her voice was barely a whisper. I chose you. Harrison, you didn't. Tell me you didn't give up your company. I gave up a company. I kept what mattered. He held out the guitar pick. You told me once your father taught you to play. That music was how you connected. I want to learn. Not because I'm trying to win you back. Because I want to know you. All of you. Without empires or offices or power dynamics in the way. Victoria stared at the small piece of plastic in his palm like it was a grenade. You're insane. Probably. But I'm also free for the first time in 15 years. Harrison smiled, and it felt genuine. I spent my whole life building things. Let me spend the rest of it building something with you. Something real. You gave up everything. I gave up things that were killing me slowly. Money, power, control, the need to be important. He stepped closer. But I kept the only thing that makes me feel alive, the hope that you might give us a real chance. Tears streamed down Victoria's face. You're a fool. A fool in love with an extraordinary woman who taught me what actually matters. Victoria laughed through her tears, took the guitar pick from his hand. What if this doesn't work? What if we destroy each other? Then we'll have tried. And that's more than most people get. She looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd been blind for 7 years, and then gave up an empire to finally see clearly. "One condition," she said softly. "Anything. No more sacrifices. No more making ourselves smaller. If we do this, we do it as equals. Messy, honest, real." Harrison pulled her close, and this time when they kissed, it didn't taste like goodbye. It tasted like beginning. But neither of them noticed the black sedan parked across the street, or the figure in the back seat watching through tinted windows. Neither understood that Harrison's sacrifice had made powerful enemies, and neither knew that the price of choosing love over empire was about to come due in ways they never imagined. 3 months later, Harrison lived in a world he barely recognized. No penthouse, no corner office, no empire demanding his attention at all hours. Instead, he woke up in Victoria's small apartment to sunlight streaming through cheap curtains and the smell of coffee brewing in a kitchen barely large enough for 2 people. He'd never been happier, Victoria emerged from the bathroom, hair damp from the shower, wearing one of his old shirts. "You're smiling like an idiot again. Can't help it." "I'm watching the woman I love make terrible coffee in the worst kitchen I've ever seen." She threw a dish towel at him. "The coffee is perfect and you know it." "It's actually pretty bad." "Then make your own." "Billionaire." But she was smiling as she said it, the real smile he'd spent 7 years never seeing. Harrison stood, pulled her close. "Ex-billionaire. I'm solidly upper middle class now. How's that working out for you?" "Best decision I ever made." He kissed her forehead. "Second best was convincing you to let me stick around." They'd spent 3 months learning each other. Harrison discovered Victoria was terrible at cooking, but brilliant at fixing things. That she cried during old movies and laughed at jokes that weren't funny. That she sang in the shower and talked in her sleep and sometimes woke up in the middle of the night reaching for work that wasn't there anymore. Victoria learned Harrison was actually funny when he wasn't performing competence. That he loved terrible action movies and was surprisingly good at guitar. That he had nightmares about his father's death and carried guilt about the people he'd used on his way to the top. They fought sometimes. Real fights where voices raised and doors slammed and honest words cut deep. But they always came back, always talked it through, always chose each other again. "I have a job interview today," Victoria said, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. "Small architecture firm. Entry-level position. You're overqualified." "I know, but I want to build things again. Real things, not just other people's empires." She handed him a mug. "What about you? Any leads?" Harrison had spent the past months consulting for small businesses, using his expertise to help struggling companies survive. The pay was terrible compared to what he'd made before. The satisfaction was infinitely better. Meeting with a nonprofit this afternoon. They need help restructuring their operations. He sipped the coffee and tried not to wince. It really was terrible. Pays almost nothing, but the work matters. Look at us. Practically normal people. Never thought I'd hear you say that like it's a good thing. Victoria leaned against the counter, studying him with an expression he still couldn't fully read. "Are you happy, Harrison? Really happy? Or do you miss it?" He considered the question seriously. Did he miss the power? Sometimes, the rush of closing huge deals. Occasionally, the feeling of controlling an empire? Rarely. "I miss being important," he admitted. "Not to the world, to you. For 7 years, you needed me in a specific way. Now you don't need me at all. That's harder than I expected." Victoria set down her mug, moved to stand in front of him. "I do need you, just differently. I need you to make terrible jokes when I'm stressed. I need you to hold me when my nightmares about being invisible come back. I need you to remind me it's okay to take up space." She cupped his face. "The old version of us was you being important and me being invisible. This version is both of us being seen. That's better, even if it's scarier." "When did you become so wise?" "About 3 months ago when a fool gave up everything for me, and I realized I had to be brave enough to accept it." Harrison's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Turn on the news. Now." Dread pooled in Harrison's stomach. Something's wrong. They turned on Victoria's small television to find their faces filling the screen. But this wasn't old news about the scandal. This was something new. The anchor spoke with practiced gravity. Breaking news in the Harrison Blackwood story. Documents leaked this morning reveal that Blackwood Industries' new ownership engaged in systematic fraud during their acquisition. Federal investigators have opened a criminal probe. Former CEO Harrison Blackwood is being called to testify as a material witness. Victoria's face went pale. They're setting you up. Harrison's mind raced. The documents on screen were ones he'd signed during the sale, but the numbers had been altered, modified to make it look like he'd knowingly sold a company with inflated assets. His phone rang. His former lawyer. Harrison, don't say anything to anyone. These charges could mean prison time. They're claiming you committed fraud to inflate the sale price. I didn't. Those documents were clean when I signed them. Can you prove that? Harrison closed his eyes. No, I was moving too fast. I didn't keep copies of the originals. Then we have a problem. The call ended. Harrison sat heavily on the couch, the weight of his mistake crushing down. He'd been so focused on choosing Victoria that he'd been careless. And now that carelessness might cost him everything. Victoria knelt in front of him. We'll fight this. With what? I gave away my resources. I don't have the money for the kind of legal team I'd need. Then we'll find another way. Her voice was fierce. You didn't sacrifice everything just to lose it to people who want to destroy you. Over the next week, the news cycle devoured them. Harrison Blackwood, fallen billionaire, now facing federal fraud charges. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd built an empire through ruthless efficiency was being taken down by his one moment of emotional decision-making, Catherine. Wells called from London. I have information, she said without preamble. The board members who pushed you out? They orchestrated this. They wanted you gone. But they also wanted to ensure you couldn't start over. So they altered the sale documents and leaked them to federal prosecutors. Why are you telling me this? Because Victoria deserves better than watching you go to prison for choosing her. Catherine's voice softened. And because I always liked you better when you were human. Can you prove the documents were altered? I have emails, internal communications showing the plan. But Harrison, if I release these, I burn every bridge I have in the business world. The board members involved are powerful people. Harrison understood what she was offering, and what it would cost her. Don't. I won't ask you to sacrifice your career for me. You're not asking. I'm offering. Catherine paused. Victoria taught you to see people. Let me show you I learned that lesson too. The evidence Catherine provided was damning. Emails showing conspiracy to commit fraud. Plans to frame Harrison using the sale documents. Proof that the board had acted in bad faith to destroy him after he chose to walk away. But releasing it meant Catherine would face retaliation from some of the most powerful people in international business. Her career would be over. Harrison called her before she could leak anything. Don't do this. It's already done. I sent everything to the prosecutors an hour ago. She sounded tired but certain. Some things matter more than career advancement. Turns out Victoria taught me that too. The charges against Harrison were dropped within 48 hours. The investigation pivoted to focus on the board members who'd conspired against him. 3 were arrested. 2 more resigned in disgrace. Blackwood Industries' stock collapsed. The company Harrison had built was dismantled and sold for parts. He watched the news with Victoria beside him, holding his hand as his life's work crumbled on screen. How do you feel? She asked softly. Free. And he meant it. They tried to bury me using my own creation. Instead, they destroyed the thing I used to think defined me. And I'm still here. We're still here. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. Catherine sacrificed everything for us. I know. We'll help her rebuild. When things settle, we'll figure out how to support her. You really have changed. Victoria smiled. The old you would have used her sacrifice and moved on. The old me would have missed the point entirely. Harrison turned to face her. The point isn't empire building or winning or being important. It's about being seen and seeing others. It's about building something that matters, even if it's small. 6 months later, Harrison and Victoria stood in the lobby of a modest building in a neighborhood that used to be warehouses. The sign above the door read, Sterling and Blackwood Community Development. Their nonprofit focused on helping small businesses survive, teaching people the skills Harrison had learned building his empire and the relationship management Victoria had perfected over 7 years. They worked with struggling entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, community organizers. The pay was minimal, The hours were long. The impact was real. Catherine Wells joined them after her career in London collapsed as predicted. She brought her international expertise and her hard-won understanding that success meant different things at different times. On a Tuesday evening, Harrison locked up the office while Victoria finished a grant proposal. The autumn air smelled of rain and new beginnings. "I've been thinking," Victoria said, not looking up from her laptop. "Dangerous," she smiled, "about how we started. You being blind, me being invisible, both of us so damaged we could barely function as human beings. Romantic. And now look at us, running a nonprofit from a converted warehouse, making decent coffee, helping people who need it." She finally met his eyes. "We're not powerful anymore. We're not important in the ways we used to be. But we're real." Harrison crossed to her desk, spun her chair around, and knelt in front of her. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Victoria's breath caught. "Harrison, I gave up an empire for you, but that was easy because the empire was killing me." He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring. "This is harder, because this is me asking you to build something with me. Not a company, not a career, a life. Messy, complicated, real." Tears streamed down Victoria's face. "You're supposed to make speeches before proposing." "I've made enough speeches. I'd rather just be honest." He took her hand. "I love you. You taught me to see, taught me what matters, taught me that being important means nothing if you're not connected to something real. Marry me, not because it's romantic or dramatic, because I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life and make terrible coffee together." Victoria laughed through her tears. "The coffee isn't terrible. It really is. Yes, the coffee is terrible, or yes, you'll marry me." "Both." She pulled him up and kissed him. "Yes, I'll marry you, you impossible man." They stood there in the quiet office, holding each other as rain began to fall outside. Two broken people who'd found each other in the ruins of who they used to be. Harrison had spent 15 years building an empire. But standing here with Victoria in his arms, he finally understood what he'd been building toward all along. Not power. Not wealth. Not importance. Connection. Truth. Love. The things that actually mattered when everything else fell away. 2 years later, their wedding was small. Catherine officiated. A handful of former colleagues and new friends attended. Marcus sent flowers with a card that read, "You were right. Congratulations." Victoria wore a simple dress. Harrison wore a suit he'd bought off the rack. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves in a community center they'd helped fund. "I promise to see you," Harrison said, "every day for the rest of our lives." "I promise to let myself be seen," Victoria replied, "even when it's terrifying." They kissed as rain drummed against the windows and their small crowd cheered. Later, at the tiny reception in a local restaurant, Catherine pulled Harrison aside. "You gave up everything and gained more than you lost. How does that feel?" Harrison looked across the room at Victoria, laughing with genuine joy as she talked to a nonprofit director they'd helped save from bankruptcy. "Like I finally figured out what success actually means." Which is? Building something that lasts. Not in markets or stock prices. In people. In connections. In love, he smiled. Turns out the perfect machine was never the goal. Being perfectly human was. That night, Harrison and Victoria returned to their apartment. Not the penthouse he'd once owned. Not the mansion he could have afforded. Just a small space filled with books and music and evidence of a life actually lived. Victoria fell asleep against his chest while old movie credits rolled on their secondhand television. Harrison held her, listening to her breathe, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his. He'd spent 7 years with her invisible beside him. He'd spent 3 months choosing her over everything. Else, now he had a lifetime to keep seeing her and to keep being seen. Outside, the city hummed with ambition and empire building and the endless pursuit of importance. Inside, 2 formerly broken people had built something small and true and lasting. Not perfect, just real. And that was enough. The end.